And you're a part of that. So if you hurt it, you're hurting yourself. If you help it, you're helping yourself. And we have found that in the lives of people who are doing the medical apps, helping persuade people to heal themselves, things in the viewer's life gets better too.
Yes.
So in the process of healing others, you help heal yourself as well.
Lyn, you stated in a previous interview that sound, smells, and tastes are far more accurate to remote viewing than numbers or visuals, particularly when it comes to associative remote viewing. Why do you think this is the case, and do you think sight is the least dependable sense that we have more likely?
The reason that we can figure out is simply that, you've been smelling and tasting and feeling things all your life, whereas numbers, these are conceptual things that you've had to learn. The letters and even actual words themselves are things that you've had to learn as vocabulary. One of the things we've found is that a person who speaks multiple languages tends to get more nuance in their remote viewing information than people who only speak one language. And, I know in my remote viewing I speak 5 languages, and many times a word will come in Russian or German or Japanese or whatever, because that word has a slightly different nuance than the English word. And for an analyst, for a CRV analyst, they have to know their viewers, and they have to know what languages their viewers speak and all, because these words that come in do have these nuances of meaning. And why do the physical things? We tell people that controlled remote viewing is as much a physical discipline as it is a mental one. In fact, it's very much based on the martial arts. These are more primitive things, and these are more natural to us. And so when you first get mental access to a site, what you're going to perceive first of all is those more primitive things to you. If you're visually oriented, you're going to start seeing things. This is called remote viewing, but actually a person who thinks in pictures is going to see pictures. A person who thinks in words is going to start coming up with all kinds of words that may or may not make sense at the time, but you perceive them, you write them down. It's all about the perceptions. And the more primitive things to you, the more basic things to you are going to come in first. And we have 6 levels in remote viewing that are taught to the public. There are actually right now 18 levels, but only 6 are taught to the public. And these levels are, first of all, that you get the gestalts. This is the first thing that, no matter how long you do controlled remote viewing, the first thing you're going to get in every session is the gestalts. That is the e-ness of something. Like I don't know what this target is, but there is wateriness, there is landiness, there is man-madiness here, and things like that. And then, if you're lucky enough to have a monitor, the monitor says, "Oh, describe that which has wateriness." Oh, okay. Well, it has, and that's when you go into the sensories. Oh, it tastes salty, it feels cold, and it's this color, it's a dark green color. And then all of a sudden you start getting the patterns and the shapes, because these are a little more complex. And you say, and it's wavy, and big waves, and so on. And then once you've described that, the monitor says, describe the landiness part of it. Oh, okay. Well, there's a grassy texture, and it's green, and so you start developing just descriptions like that. But you always start with the descriptions that are more primitive to you, and then you work your way up into things like, well, once you get up into stage 6, you're doing measurements. This tall thing is exactly 50.4 feet high and so wide and so on. And so the more basic things to you are going to be the things that you come out with first. And touch, smell, taste, temperatures, things like that, those are things you've been doing all your life. So those are the most basic things. And so that's why they come in first.
Thank you, Lyn. I'll just pass it over quickly to Sandra.
Hi, Lyn. I appreciate you taking the time to answer some of our questions. And
my pleasure.
I really appreciate it. My question has to do with an answer you gave several questions back. And you mentioned about the remote viewing and imagination and artistic abilities. And the question is, if practicing remote viewing helps with the imagination and artistic abilities, does it then follow that one works on their imagination and artistic abilities, it would then enhance the remote viewing experience?
The answer is that it enhances the controlled remote viewing ability simply because we are putting the remote viewer in control of the process. Now, as far as remote viewing goes, unfortunately, it often has the opposite effect. A normal psychic person will start perceiving things like it's white, there's a medicine-y smell, there's a chemical smell, and all of a sudden their imagination kicks in and they say, and in this hospital there is, and all of a sudden all of their perceptions have to deal with a hospital. When in fact the target may not be a hospital at all, and it may be someplace else that is white and has, medicine-y smells and chemical smells. And so for a natural psychic, or what's called natural remote viewer, this often works to their disadvantage. And in fact, this has been one of the things that has brought psychics ridicule, even good psychics, has brought them ridicule for years, is that they will get 2 or 3 impressions, and then their imagination kicks in and they jump to a conclusion, and it's the wrong conclusion. And once they've jumped to that conclusion, man, you're just not going to get them off of that. And so they just spin on out of control and just make themselves more and more wrong. With the controlled remote viewing, we have learned and we teach steps to prevent that. And so the imagination in controlled remote viewing helps you look for new things. You say, if it's white and medicine-y smell, then are there such and such, that would lead you to find out what is actually at the site. It keeps you from jumping to conclusions. Asking questions keeps you from jumping to conclusions, which is basically giving yourself answers. And so this is, again, a complex answer to a very simple question. But the imagination does help if you know how to control your imagination. If you don't, then you're just going to spin out of control. And the imagination can quite often just ruin everything you're doing. Was that an answer to your question? I may have spun off on a tangent myself there.
Well, I think we're enjoying the tangents you're spinning off on, so that's not a concern. But yes, you did answer the question that the imagination can be a liability unless you know how to control it and rein it in.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Is that a good... Well, yes. Lyn, I thank you for the answer, and I think we're supposed to go to Disaster Cat now.
Oh, okay.
I've just got one more, actually. Lyn, you also you you mentioned remote influencing a moment ago, but I also recall in an interview, I think it was with Kim Greenhouse, you mentioned a term detoxification, which you stated was
Yes.
getting out of someone's mind if you happen to
Yeah.
get mental access to theirs. This statement, for some reason, reminds me of the movie Inception, where Leonardo DiCaprio enters people's minds and tricks the subject into disclosing some sort of information. Could you explain further what you mean by mentally accessing another's mind, remote influencing, and detoxification?
Yeah. Mentally accessing another person's mind is, I can give you a definition, but the experience of it is so far from the clinical definition that it seemed like something totally different. But the accessing of someone else's mind starts basically with remote viewing that person, and then getting descriptors of how that person is acting, like are they acting angry, are they acting happy, or something like that. And then starting to sort of join with that person's emotions. Now, emotions are something that we teach controlled remote viewers can be very bad simply because they're so sticky. They're like in Uncle Remus' Tales of the South, they're like the tar baby. The minute you touch it, you're stuck. And the process of accessing someone's mind can actually get you involved in their emotions. And let's take a really, really drastic case here and say that this person is an axe murderer, okay? And so you get into this person's mind and you start feeling the joy that they feel when they bludgeon someone with an axe. And, no person is bad to themselves. They always have ways to justify everything they do because they're actually a good person. And so all of a sudden you start getting soaked up into that person's rationalization of how axe murdering is such a good thing to do, and so on. And this is stuff that you don't want to come away with. And the remote access of another person is a very dangerous thing. It actually is. Very dangerous to the viewer. Now, the fact is you can't view something without influencing it in some way, and so it's going to take that person and mildly change them to your views as well. But you wind up being left with their views, their feelings, their memories, their joys and their emotions, and you really don't want to do that. You therefore have to detox, and there is a process that we have developed that lets you kind of like a zipper, you unzip one little notch at a time and get yourself away from that person to get yourself back to yourself so that you separate that person from you. And it's a slow, intricate process. You may remote view a person and do what's called getting sucked into that person, and that session may take you 15 minutes, and yet you may spend 3 hours detoxing from that person. And what we tell everyone is spend the 3 hours. You don't want that person going home to your family. You don't want that person influencing your life, their views and their morals and all that. You don't want them influencing your life.